Hey girls, last week we finished up um, chapter 18. So we're going to be looking at World War One. You should have watched the video, the crash course before opening up this presentation. If you haven't, go back, watch that so you can have some type of background before taking these notes down. Let's take a look at our presentation. Okay. Okay, so World War One. And this starts in your textbook on page 576. As World War One intensifies, the U.S. is forced to abandon its neutrality. Okay. Let's see. So here are the four main long-term causes of World War One. Militarism, which is a policy where you build up your armed forces to intimidate other countries. This is also known as an arms race. An arms race is basically one country telling another country that they have more and more weapons, that they're developed more and more, strategies for fighting. And so other countries, in response, they build up their own arms. And you see this back and forth of race between all of these countries who are trying to advertise, their militarism at home. Alliances are agreements between nations that help one another in the event of war. These are allies. Imperialism is the desire of a country to spread its influence around the globe. Imperialism mostly deals with countries conquering other people and acquiring more territory and more land. Nationalism is devotion to the interests and culture of one's nation. Nationalism can be positive, and it can also be super negative. And in this sense, nationalism or devotion to the interests of one nation can lead to xenophobia and pretty much feeling the need to civilize or conquer another nation, to have it kind of morph into your culture as well, like westernization. So here are more causes of World War One, right? We have the arms race, nationalist movements, Bosnia, right? We saw that the Bosnians assassinated Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Right, so we were just kind of checking these out again. Militarism. In 1890, Germany had the strongest army in Europe, and they compete with Britain for power on the sea, right? Naval power. And this leads other powers to join this naval arms race of seeing who has the best equipment, who is has the most advanced military strategy, and so forth. We have the alliance system. Okay, we have France, Britain, and Russia on one team, basically, and then we have Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. These are your central powers. And alliances basically give security, and nations are unwilling to tip the balance of power. So let's see what's happening. Germany industrializes, and they compete with France and Britain for colonies. Okay, and this is kind of like showing you visually who was buddied up. Okay, let's see. So nationalism is devotion to the interests or culture of one's nation, and it can lead to competition, antagonism between nations, right? Going back and forth over whose nation is stronger, more admirable. And people are afraid of how powerful Germany is becoming in Europe. We're going to see ethnic groups resent domination, and they're going to want independence. And Russia sees itself as a protector of all Slavic peoples. Okay, so you have to choose a side. So Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated by Serbian nationalists, and this causes a chain reaction among the alliances. Everybody takes this personally and sees it as a direct threat or a direct attack to the entire alliance, and these events start the war. So let's fill in this timeline. We have Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophia. They are assassinated in Bosnia. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia, we're going to see that in the John Green video, you saw that once people start to mobilize, once one nation starts to mobilize, war really starts to get into gear. So everyone's readying their troops. And Germany, because Germany is partnered up or allies with Austria-Hungary, they declare war on Russia, right? They see this as a direct attack. So now we have two big powers going against one another on behalf of a smaller nation. To reach France, Germany invades Belgium. This draws Great Britain into the war. The Allies and the Central Powers quickly reach a stalemate. Nothing's really happening. And the U.S. wants to stay neutral, right? The U.S. does not want to be involved. However, the preparedness movement does urge the U.S. government to get ready for the event of war. Okay, so let's check this out. All right, take a look at this map. Okay. So we're going to see the fighting begin. We have early battles like Germany's Schlieffen Plan. They want to hold Russia, defeat France, and then Russia. German troops make their way through Belgium, and they cause a major refugee crisis. A refugee is someone who is in danger and travels in the event of war. By spring of 1915, two parallel systems of trenches cross France. You call the land between two opposing trenches, the land that separates them, this is called no man's land. This is a barren expanse of mud between opposing trenches, and there is mass slaughter. It's pretty bad at this point. So people are dying left and right, and no one's winning. So the armies fight to gain only a couple of yards of ground in what we call trench warfare. So trench warfare is a major staple of World War I. Let's see. So the Schlieffen Plan was Germany's war plan. They would attack France through Belgium. Germany would loop around and attack Russia, but this plan foiled. We're looking at a new kind of war. New technology made fighting more difficult, and which made casualties skyrocket with inventions and advancements like the machine gun, hand grenades, and mustard gas. These inventions will totally change the climate of war and result in much with wars that are much more violent with higher death tolls. So no man's land, like I said, occupied region between enemy lines. Trench warfare was a system where troops would attack and open up the battlefield from, coming up out of the trenches. New technology and old fighting causes a stalemate. So this is an image of what a battle would look like. And you can see the trenches and the people climbing out of them. So Americans are questioning neutrality, right? We have socialists, pacifists, and ordinary people who are against the United States involving themselves in the war. You can see through this cartoon on the left, who's absent. It's Britain pointing at the United States, and it says, "Is it you?" Right? Trying to encourage people to help join the war. Saying who's absent kind of insinuates that they have a responsibility to defend, whatever country, is pointing the finger. So naturalized citizens are concerned about how this will affect the country, based on their country of birth. Many people feel ties to the British ancestry, the language, the democracy, and the legal system, and they feel a responsibility to aid them in war. The U.S. has stronger economic ties with the Allies rather than the Central Powers. The war hits home. So the United States begins to prepare, and by 1917, the U.S. has mobilized for war against the Central Powers to make sure that they ensure Allied repayment of debts and to prevent the German threat to United States shipping. Okay. And here's another piece of war propaganda on the right. You see a large animal holding a stick that says culture, obviously spelled wrong, stepping on America and kind of tearing away the Statue of Liberty, right? So it's kind of trying to symbolize that this, the enemy is uncivilized and that the enemy is threatening our very democracy and our very the freedoms that our government protects. So, when did the U.S. start to prepare for war? The U.S. started to prepare for war in 1917. So the war does hit home. We're going to see the British blockade. The British blockade stops war supplies from reaching Germany, and they stop sending. This stops the flow of food and fertilizer as well. So this is obviously going to cause a problem for Germany because the people are going to starve and they're not going to be able to harvest their crops. If you look again at the cartoon, really kind of just highlighting undesirable features on the face, making the person look scary. We're going to see that U.S. merchant ships seldom reach Germany, and that they do have difficulty importing food, and that they are going to see a famine. So, as you see on the right, okay, Congress, the war declaring body, called to convene, right? As the president holds a newspaper article that says American ships sunk, American lives lost. This is obviously going to stir feelings in the United States. So Germany sets up a U-boat as a counter blockade of Britain. The U-boat sinks the British liner Lusitania, and 128 Americans die. So the U.S. turns against Germany, and Woodrow Wilson protests this, but Germany continues to sink ships. Germany asks the United States to get Britain to end the food blockade, or otherwise they will renew unrestricted submarine war. So now they're threatening the United States to kind of join this battle on their behalf, and that doesn't go so well. Why did the U.S. get involved? Submarine warfare, economic ties to Britain, and the Zimmerman telegram. We know that Zimmerman created the idea of the telegram. So let's look at the economic ties to Britain. Basically, the U.S. loaned large amounts of money to Britain, and if Britain lost, the U.S. would lose all of its money. So that's kind of a superficial reason for the U.S. to be involved in the war on Britain's side. And there was a note sent in 1917 from the German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmerman to Mexico. He offered to give lands from United States lost in the Mexican War if Mexico realigned themselves in Germany. This image says that this man on the left is keeping the world safe for democracy, and he's encouraging people to enlist and help him in the war effort. Wilson decides to call for war, and the reason is to make the world safe for democracy. He wants to preserve democracy, and that is his idea. And the United States declares war. So the United States joining the war does tip the balance. They mobilize a large army, and they try to help the Allies achieve victory. You guys have all heard of the Selected Service. This was a law enacted in 1917 that required men to register for military service. And this is still active today. So America mobilizes. Let's see. Do I want to get this far yet? Yeah. Okay. So to expand fleet to transport men, food, and equipment to Europe, the United States decides to give special status to shipyard workers, uses fabrication techniques, and takes over commercial private ships. Okay, here's some images. They have the convoy system, which protects merchant ships from U-boat attacks. And the ships travel in large groups, escorted by warships, right, to kind of preserve the safety of them. So, let's see. So, after 2.5 years fighting, Allied forces are exhausted. They're demoralized. At this point, America enters the war, and they bring numbers, freshness, enthusiasm, and which kind of rallies the spirit of, the war effort. Okay. So what we're gonna see next is there's gonna be a song. Yeah. Working. Oh. Okay. Hang on, girls. Be weird. That's weird. Okay. I wonder why this is freezing. I only have 1 million PowerPoints up, right? Come on. Oh, okay, we're back. All right, cool. So here's General John J. Pershing. He's the leader of the American Expeditionary Force. Leaders were known as doughboys. An expeditionary force is like a platoon of soldiers that are impressed by cities, and they are shocked. They were shocked by battles. So fighting over there is a song, and basically this song was kind of like a war cry. New weapons were established by 1917, and the British learned to use tanks in order to clear a path for their infantry. Early planes are flimsy, and they only do scouting. Later on, we're going to see planes get stronger and faster, and they will be able to carry machine guns and heavy bomb loads. Observation balloons are used extensively, and they are a prime target of ace pilots. So we're also going to see the war introduce new hazards. Like I said, the death toll skyrockets as technology becomes more advanced, war becomes more violent and gruesome. So on the top right, you're going to see, on the top right and the bottom right are two pictures of what trench warfare looked like for hours at a time. Soldiers would have their feet in that water, which would lead to sores, infections, and having to, amputate toes. And sometimes soldiers would lose their feet and their legs. New weapons and tactics led to horrific injuries. Troops lived in filth, polluted water, and dead bodies in those trenches. And they were constantly being attacked, both sides. So many soldiers suffer from battle fatigue and shell shock. There are going to be physical problems, like I said, the trench foot. Okay, that is what trench foot looked like. American troops go on the offensive. So the Allies want to stop the German advance. Russia pulls out of the war in 1917. Germans shift armies to the Western Front, and they come within 50 miles of Paris. Americans help stop this advance, and they turn the tide against the Central Powers. Alvin York was a U.S. soldier. He was only armed with a rifle and a revolver, and he killed 25 Germans. He is a conscientious objector, which is a person who opposes war on moral grounds, and he became an American hero after the war. This was a problem for many Americans who considered themselves Quaker, pacifist, who did not want to be a part of the war effort but were forced. Okay, so I think that American troops go on the offensive. All right, so we're going to keep going. So Germany collapses. In 1918, Austria-Hungary surrenders to the Allies. German soldiers and sailors rebel, and socialists establish a German republic. The Kaiser gives up the throne. Germans are exhausted, and they want an armistice, which is like a ceasefire. They want a truce, and this is signed in November of 1918. War comes to an end. So World War I is the bloodiest war in history to date. More than half of the 22 million dead were civilians, and 20 million more wounded. 10 million people become refugees, and this destroyed an entire generation of young men. Think about it. Every young man between the ages of 18 and, let's say 30 are forced to go to war, and many of them don't come home to their families. So this war throughout the globe really just took a toll on humanity. Right? So here's kind of like a visual. So that was that. You're going to have worksheets to complete. I'm also going to have you, like I said, you had to have watched that John Green video. I'm going to try to find a clip of that song, over there and attach that so you can listen to it. Please let me know if you have any questions. Expect a quiz, a 10-question quiz as like a warm-up the next time I post for you guys. Thanks so much for your patience. Let me know if you need any help. Shoot me an email.